Welcome to the String Theory of the Unexplained. I'm your host, John Ventry. Our co-host is Fred Saluga. And today's episode is called Once Upon a Time. We're going to talk about fairy tales and nursery rhymes and the version you didn't know. But first, Fred, I want to tell you, we filmed, what was it? It was about 6-7 weeks ago. We did the Wuhan virus, right? I didn't shave since then. I shaved last week.
Okay.
But my beard was out like here. It looked like Santa Claus. You know, I drove out to see my grandkids in Missouri, and they were calling me Santa Claus. But I haven't had a haircut.
Mm-hmm.
This is the longest my hair has been since I retired in 2012. And the beard was...
You look at it, mine's all gone.
There you go. But I need a haircut. But I don't know, I kind of like the beard.
I'm going to keep my arms like this today, John.
No thumb twiddling,
No
huh?
thumb
That's it.
twiddling,
Keep
no.
your hands still. So
I caught myself already.
first thing, let me say this, Fred. I bought this book, which is the cover of our episode, called The Big Book of Grimm. And I think I bought this in 2010. And it said the original uncensored bedtime stories, all in their grim glory, right? And it has a
Right, the
blood,
blood, yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
I bought that years ago. And, you know, I remember looking through it and stuff. But then I came across something about the Wizard of Oz, right? I said, I never heard of this before. So I went online and I wanted to get the original version from 1900. And it was a series of books that were published, right? So I came across this one and it said the Annotated Wizard of Oz by Frank Baum, who was the author, right? So it said it had original photos in it. So I got it, and I go through it. It's not. There was a couple of pictures in it. There's no original version of the story. This is the Disney version is what it is. So I don't know how to get, I searched all over, Barnes & Noble, Amazon. I don't know how to get the original version that he published, but you're going to see the original version, some of the pictures from the book. But I was kind of hoping that this would have been it, but it wasn't it, you know? So let's go through this, and it's called Once Upon a Time. Did you ever watch that show on TV? I think on ABC? It was on for about 8 years, had all the characters, and it was a modern day version of it. And we're going to talk about other Christmas classics and stuff like that. But all of these books use dark symbolism, and usually in the story, good wins over evil. Right? And if you do something bad, there are consequences to bad action. And that's why some of these things happen to people, right? But you have to remember back in the 1800s, death was more common than today.
Right.
Now everybody's flipping out over COVID-19, but and we talked about this. You know, you had 5 kids, 2 died. You know, 3 died. Right. So it was more common, and there was no coddling kids. It was like, you know, spare the rod, you spoil the child. Right. You know, you got to grow up at 10, 12 years old. And that's the way it was, you know. They were basically scared straight is what happened, you know. The literature through the years, 1800s, you had a lot of gothic horror, you know, with books on Frankenstein, Dracula. And then, you know, you get into the fairy tales, which are always based on other pagan stories and passed through the years. But in England, they had Lewis Carroll. Germany had Grimm. France had Charles Perrault. Denmark, Hans Christian Andersen. And the U.S. was Frank Baum. All right? In all the stories, it's kind of like this risk everything for love. You know, it's like to get the girl, to kiss, you know, that type of thing. But what I learned was, there were many adaptations. The story we saw in Disney, let's say now, totally different than the originals. You know, and that's why I bought this book. And I can't. When we go through Wizard of Oz next, you're going to love it. You're going to love it. Unbelievable story. So, 1900, we have the Wizard of Oz book. The first one comes out. There's a series of books that he put out and became the whole story, right? Totally different than the 1939 movie. In this one, the original one, the Tin Man chopped off his arms and legs with the axe. Now, I don't know how he got the last one. Think about it. What did I do, hit myself? But he managed to chop his arms and legs off, and then he became the Tin Man. And what he would do, he'd go around with his axe, and he cut anybody that attacked them, he cut their head off. You know, like some horror movie, you know. And at one point, he's attacked by 40 wolves, and he cuts all their heads off with the axe. So, totally different version of the Tin Man. The wizard in the story, he hated cats. So what he would do, he'd lobotomize cats. So here you got a picture, and these pictures are from the original version. You got this cat that's like, you know, out of its mind because the wizard would lobotomize the cats. Yeah. He hated cats. There was a pumpkin head creature in it, and his head would rot. So he would throw it, like here, throw it in the stream, yeah. And he had to get himself a new head. He kept replacing his head, I guess, with pumpkins that became his head. In the story, the princess, she steals heads. You can see, like, she's got a trophy thing of heads. Yeah. She steals heads. The Wicked Witch was not the true nemesis of Dorothy. It was a gnome in the original story. And this is a picture of the gnome king of Oz. That's the original. That's what it was. It wasn't the Wicked Witch of the West, you know? So the Scarecrow, he's got a girlfriend. His girlfriend is a patchwork doll, right? And the doll can turn people into stone statues. Like Medusa, right? That's probably where he got it from. You know, with the snakes, turns them to stone. And the Scarecrow, he would go around snapping people's necks. There was something about this guy with cutting heads off and snapping necks. That's what the story, what happened in it, you know? There's a village full of porcelain people and clown dolls. And get this, this is cool. The monkeys didn't fly. What they had was their four paws were wheels. So they'd skate around, and then when they came up to you, they'd slice you. They'd slice you with the wheel. I mean, it's unbelievable. But you know, but they didn't fly around like you saw in the Wizard of Oz, the movie that I got right over there, you know? So the real creature that was featured in the story was an animal that was half tiger, half bear. The body was the bear, the head and the hind legs and stuff was the tiger. That's the one that was chasing them. There was another scene where there's this edible town of people and the town. They were small. And Toto ate them all. He ate all the people. So I look at this and I said, you know, the original Wizard of Oz was probably the first graphic novel that was put together, you know. In the story, the king, finally, they get the king, they put him in a pond and bury him in rocks, so he drowns to death, and he's covered in rocks. There's a blue bear that chokes to death on a fishbone. They finally catch the patchwork girl, and they put her in a cage after she ate one of the monkeys. Everything was really dark, a lot of political symbolism. And I'm saying to myself, wouldn't this make like a great Rob Zombie movie? So think about a horror movie now with the original version, right, and not the Disney version of The Wizard of Oz, you know? So here's your modern version. No heart, no brain, no courage, no clue. I had to throw that in. Right. So, you know, I'm looking, and
I like the pictures of them too.
Yeah, well, that's why I put it in there, you know. Sticks and stones, you probably heard the sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me, right? So I looked that up, and it turns out that was first said in March of 1862. It was printed in the Christian Recorder periodical, and it was put in there because of liberals that were name-calling and bullying Christians. So how you like that? That's where sticks and stones came from. So when you get attacked by the liberal left, that's what you should say, sticks and stones, because the words can't do anything to you. And I can attest to that. So let's move on to Alice in Wonderland, right? So, you know, it's funny, a lot of these are based on true stories.
Right.
So Alice in Wonderland is Alice Liddell. She's 11 years old. She becomes friends with Lewis Carroll. He's 24. He wrote the story based on her. And they're friends from 11 to 18, and then the parents abruptly ended, and he's not allowed to see her anymore. So, don't know what happened, and there is nothing about anything happening, but it just ended after 7 years. This is the real Alice. She actually went on, she almost married Prince Leopold, but he couldn't marry her because she wasn't of royal blood, and that's the picture that's on the right there. So it's really based on a real person, yeah. Alice in Wonderland. Lewis Carroll also wrote Humpty Dumpty in 1872, and he was English, British. And and back then, Humpty Dumpty is a British nickname for somebody that's obese. They called him Humpty Dumpty. There's absolutely no reference to it being an egg.
Yeah.
So they made it an egg in the cartoons and in the movies and stuff. But so what was Humpty Dumpty? They said it was a large cannon that was used in the wars, or it was King Richard III, or they say it may have been a person with brittle bone disease, because when they fall down they break. And I had a friend who had a son, and he had that disease. It was horrible. Every little thing, the bones would snap. It's such a shame. So sad. Sleeping Beauty. Get this one. Sleeping Beauty, the king rapes her while she's in a coma, and she has twins. She wakes up, not from a kiss, but from breastfeeding the kids. That wakes her up, right? And she becomes the mistress of the king that raped her, and they live happily ever after. That's the real story of Sleeping Beauty. So I think back then it was like if you weren't of the royal line, you weren't going to marry the king.
Right, right.
So the best she could be as a peasant was his mistress.
Right.
You know? I still don't see the redeeming value in these stories, but that's what they were about. This one here is true also. In Beauty and the Beast, it's an actual guy that's got that disease that, condition that he grows hair. And that's where a lot of the Wolfman legends came from also, was this. But what happened was they captured this guy, and he's given to the king as a gift. This is a real portrait of him, right?
Right.
So the Queen Catherine of France, she marries him to this woman. That's the real woman. That's a portrait of her. They actually have 7 kids, 4 of which have the same issue with the hair all over them. And the queen takes them and gives them as gifts to other nobles. Here, have one. You want one? I'll give you one too. Hey, look at this. And they parade the kids around as, abnormalities and stuff. And so that's the actual portraits of the people. So that's where Beauty and the Beast actually came from. Little Red Riding Hood. This might be your favorite, right? One of them. Well, let me give you the version I came across. You tell me what you know, right? And one version of Little Red Riding Hood, it wasn't a wolf, but it was this ogre, right? Not a wolf. And he kills the grandmother, takes her intestines and ties the door shut with it. Then he takes her blood and her teeth, mixes it with rice into like a porridge, right? So Little Red Riding Hood comes over and she's hungry and she eats it. So she basically eats her grandmother. Then I found out in researching it that the Nazis, they said that the wolf in the story was Jewish.
Right.
Of course.
That's the same story I read.
Yeah. So did you come across anything different with that?
Well, then he ate her.
And then he ate Little Red Riding Hood?
Yeah, Little Red Riding Hood.
Yeah. But it's funny how, I guess back then, prior to 1900, you couldn't copyright stories. Because The Wizard of Oz is copywritten, And he was maybe one of the first. But some of these stories written in the 1800s, I guess you couldn't copyright them. So many different versions. The Little Mermaid, which they made into Disney, right? The Little Mermaid actually committed suicide. What happened was she drank a potion that grew legs, but when she drank it, it dissolved her tongue. And then when she tried to walk, she had all these stabbing pains in her legs. It was horrible, like neuropathy, and she ended up committing suicide. That's the true story of the Little Mermaid. Hansel and Gretel, the mother drops them off in the woods because they eat too much. She can't afford to feed them. So she drops them off in the woods, and in the story, she planned to set the woods on fire to make sure they didn't come back. That's unbelievable. Unbelievable. Cinderella. You know about this one, right? Yeah. So Cinderella, the stepsisters, what they did in order to get their foot to fit into the slipper, they actually cut their heels off, sliced their heel of their foot off so they can get it into the shoe. Now you heard a different version of what
that's what I heard.
Well, I also heard they burned it off, right? They burned it off or they cut it off.
They had the slipper real hot and they put their feet in there until it burned.
Yeah. And then what happened in the story, a bird comes and pecks one eye out of each sister. Because they were, trying to screw their sister over and trying to harm her. So a bird comes and pokes one of their eyes out from each sister. Pinocchio, he kills Jiminy Cricket with a hammer. He should have been in The Wizard of Oz. He killed Jiminy Cricket with a hammer. Aladdin, the way he was able to get the lamp, he has his wife seduce the sorcerer and sleep with him, so while he's occupied, he sneaks in and he takes the lamp. I mean, these are great children nursery rhymes, the original versions. In Rapunzel, the prince that tries to save her, he crawls up, climbs up, and then he falls into thorn bushes, and the thickets, they tear his eyes out as he tries to get out of the bushes.
I never heard that one.
Yeah. Yeah, most of these versions I had never heard of. In Snow White, the huntsman is ordered to bring Snow White's liver and lungs back. People in the story are put into barrels, and the barrels are lined with spikes, and they roll the barrels down the hill. So you're getting impaled the whole time you're rolling down the hill. The enemies, let's say.
Sounds like some of the politicians we know.
Yeah, right? I know, isn't it? Right? So how Snow White kills the evil queen is she puts these red hot iron shoes on her and makes her dance around in the flaming red hot iron shoes, and it kills the evil queen. So the real question is, Fred, if you come across a girl, 7-year-old, in a glass coffin, would you kiss her?
No.
And wake her up? Well, in this story they did, and she came back and she's Snow White. Ring Around the Roses, right? That's based on the Black Death, right? Ring Around the Roses, a pocket of posies, which are the sores, a tish, we all fall down and die, is what that was. We all fall down and die. And luckily, we haven't had, this COVID-19 is not like that,
No.
Here's a story I never even heard of.
No.
The Girl Without Hands. Did you ever hear that?
No.
In this one, the father cuts her hands off as a demonic sacrifice for power, for money, that type of thing. So a king hears about it and creates gold hands and fits them on. And the end of the story, because the girl always stayed true and faithful, God restores her hands back to the originals. So, I mean, that's like the only good story I've heard so far, but it starts off with a demonic sacrifice. All right, this is cool. In Iceland, they have the story of the Yule Lads, and their mother is called Grilla, and she has a demonic cat, and what they do is they eat bad kids alive. They eat them alive. I'm telling you, everything back then was scare the kids straight. Christmas came, you'd be so afraid of Christmas because of the things that were coming for all the things you did wrong throughout the year. That's what it was about. Eastern Europe. Right, so Western Europe is England, France. Eastern Europe, you have Poland and those countries that run into Czechoslovakia and all of that, Hungary, all of that. Eastern Europe, their story was Krampus, which was a goat demon. So that would interest you, right? With, what do you call the dog man and all of that, right? And cryptids. Cryptids, right? So basically this goat demon would eat bad children. Then you had the story of Frau Perchta, who would slice bad kids open, remove their organs, and replace them with stones. So all they would do was scaring the crap out of these kids, basically, Edward Scissorhands, that story, the movie, is based on this character called Struwwelpeter. It was a Christmas doll created by a psychiatrist. He really created this doll, didn't do these things, but he created the doll, and then in the story, if kids were sucking on their fingers, this doll would cut their fingers off. That's how you got kids to stop sucking on their fingers, And then if you were bad, he'd set you on fire and let's watch you burn as a kid. In this one, Saint Nick, right? He had a partner that went with him called Black Peter. So, and they would carry, and Black Peter and Saint Nick would carry away naughty kids, right? And they said Peter was black from coming down the chimney soot, right? So I'm looking at this picture that you can see, Well, if St. Nick came down the chimney, how come he ain't black?
Right.
Oh, I guess they missed that part. But that's the story of St. Nick. All right, then we talk about ghost stories.
Okay.
Ghost stories, at Christmas time, people would tell ghost stories. Now, I don't ever remember that, you know.
I don't either.
There was that one story where he went back in time, right, and of the future and of the
That's
past, the
right
ghost
there.
of future past. Yeah, Ebenezer Scrooge,
Yeah,
right?
right.
That's probably the only story I knew that
That's
was
all I ever heard.
a Christmas story, right? But what it is a pagan celebration of Yule, which was believed to be the 12 longest nights of winter before December 21st. And what happened was then the spirits would come out those 12 days of Christmas. That's where
Right.
the 12 days of Christmas came from. And it's similar to All Souls Day, which runs from November 1st to Christmas Eve. And if you look at hauntings and demonology, that is the most haunted time. It's not Halloween night, it's
Right,
the
right.
following day, November
Right,
1st.
right.
And the month of November is actually where most haunted cases, demonic cases take place. And then they go away at Christmas for Jesus' birth. Here's another one for you. Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, right? He gets chased by a Yeti, a Bigfoot, right? And the
Right.
Bigfoot wants to eat him. So that falls in line with your expeditions.
Did he get it?
In the movie, I don't remember what happened. I watched it so long ago. I didn't get Rudolph,
I
that's
didn't.
for
I
sure.
don't know. I never heard of a Yeti eating him.
Yeah, he wants to eat them. In the Middle Ages, now think about this. If you were born on Christmas Day, December 25th, children were mocked and told they would turn into a werewolf because you shouldn't be born on the same day as Jesus, and they would mock them. So now you got to say, oh, no, I wasn't born that day. I was born on the 24th or the 26th.
Yeah.
And how would you like that? Everybody's saying, well, when you get bigger, you're going to turn into a werewolf. And how did that affect these kids as they're growing up, you know?
I wonder what started that story.
Who knows? I don't know what the origin. Well, I think it was just the fact that you were mocking Jesus by being on his birthday. So, Fred, that's a quickie for us. Anything you want to add about these nursery rhymes or stuff that you wanted to hear, since you were born closer to the 1800s than the 1900s?
Yeah, okay. I think that a lot of it, you know, over the years they've changed and changed. I think now with the new generation we have now, I think they'll probably change again to fit this generation. You know, so
Everything gets rewritten.
Yeah.
It all gets rewritten. And that's what I saw with this, is that there were so many adaptations and versions and ones that we never even heard of. But
a lot of that I never heard of. I
Yeah.
mean, it's amazing.
I'm telling you, the Wizard of Oz one, they need to make a movie based on the original. Those characters and all of that, that's incredible what he originally wrote.
We was talking the other day. You remember Rocky and Bullwinkle?
Yeah.
And they had fractured fairy tales.
They had what?
Fractured fairy tales was one of the parts of their story.
Oh, okay, I don't remember that.
Yeah, well, it was like fairy tales, but they were messed up like this here, but it wasn't, I mean, as bad as this.
Oh, okay.
But they had fractured fairy tales.
Well, they probably knew that a lot of these are not the version that they're saying today. So, Fred, I don't know what we're up to, 89, 88, 90, but, you know, we're all over YouTube here with these, and, you know, we keep doing them. We got one more to do, and that's our show for this week, so enjoy.